We good? Okay. So good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with the formal public meeting. So my name is Brenda Barber. I'm the Deactivated Nuclear Power Plant Program Manager out of the Baltimore District. And so we are here this evening to discuss the SM-1A decommissioning and dismantlement project. So it's going to be hosted personally with you guys, and then we're also hosting it virtually. So my way of doing this is if you have a question during the middle of the presentation, just please raise your hand and go ahead and ask your question when it comes up so you don't have to wait till the end. And then Nicole will be monitoring the chat, so if there's something that comes up on the chat, she'll be letting me know. So next slide. So basically, introductions and welcome. Thank you guys for coming out tonight. We definitely just want to share information with you guys and answer any questions you may have. So tonight we're going to seek your feedback. We're going to share some information about what we're going to do with the project over the next 12 to 18 months. We're also going to be hosting additional public meetings as we progress with the project. Things are going to definitely change as we progress with the project. So we want to make sure that we're sharing information with you guys as things come up. So basically we're going to talk about location and a brief history of the SM-1A. We're going to talk about our regulatory framework for the SM-1A, our decommissioning planning effort that the team has worked on for the last several years, waste transportation and radiation safety, and then we'll talk about public involvement. So, you guys are all pretty aware where you're at, Fort Greeley, just outside of Delta Junction, about 100 miles to Fairbanks, 328 miles to Anchorage, and 386 miles to Whittier. Those are important to us because of part of our transportation route, which we'll be talking about later. So the affected areas of SM-1A, SM-1A was traditionally located in the north end of Building 606 on Post. So as you can see on this slide, the areas in orange are the north end of Building 606 and also Building 607 were traditionally associated with the operations of the reactor. There were also 3 wells 11, 12, and 13, that were part of the reactor operations. So those have all been isolated and those will be part of our decommissioning process. Building 606 South will remain intact and will continue to function as the central heating and power plant facility for the installation and will continue to be operated by Doyen Utilities. So just some brief history. The SM-1A was built between 58 and 62. It was constructed as part of a joint effort under the Army Nuclear Power Plant Program. It was a single loop pressurized water reactor. We did use highly enriched uranium fuel and we produced both electrical power for the installation as well as steam. The plant was operational from 62 to 72. And then in 72, based on regulatory changes and funding constraints, the Army began to discuss shutting the installation down. Its primary mission was really as an in-test service facility to see how a reactor would function in an Arctic environment. This was the one and only nuclear reactor in the state of Alaska and still currently is. So as I said, in time frame, the Army did decide to shut down the facility. At that time, the facility was placed in what we call safe store configuration. So all the control rods were removed, all the fuel was removed, and all the remaining liquid radioactive waste was removed. And the primary function of safe store is to allow the radioactivity that's still at the site to decay over time to make it safer for our employees to go back and do the decommissioning. As part of the safe store, we're issued a possession permit from our regulator, who's the Army Reactor Office, and it requires that we do regular inspections and monitoring of the site, which has been done since 73 timeframe. And as I indicated earlier, Building 606 South will not be impacted by any of our operations, and it'll continue to be operated by Doyen as part of the process. So because Doyen does operate in the south end of the building, one of the first tasks that we needed to undertake was we needed to ensure their employees could safely continue their operations while we implemented this project. So we did work with Doyon Utilities, the Defense Logistics Agency, and our sister district, Alaska District, to implement a relocation effort to move all of Doyon's employees and some of their critical infrastructure out of the north end of the plant into the south end of the plant. That relocation has been completed. Doyon's been completely relocated to the south end of the plant, is completely functional, and they continue to provide all the necessary utilities for the installation. And now this allows us to take complete control of the north end of the site and the plant to implement our project in a safe and efficient manner. So just a brief timeline from 73 to now. As I indicated, the site was shut down in 73 and went into safe store. In the early 2000s, the Army tasked us with looking at the 3 reactors that were on the Army's books and asked us to begin to look at plans to assess the hazards associated with the remaining 3 reactor sites, including Fort Greely. In 2008, we completed a historical site assessment. From 2010 to 2012, we did characterization surveys at the site and issued a final report in 2014. Then in 2019 to 2020, we did start our decommissioning planning efforts. So we undertook some additional characterization efforts at the site. We developed detailed decommissioning plans for the site. And in 2021, we did issue our final environmental assessment for the project, which resulted in a finding of no significant impact, which was signed by our district commander as well as the garrison commander at Fort Greely. And based on our decommissioning plan and the findings of the EA, we were able to apply to our Army Reactor Office for our decommissioning permit, which we received in May of 2022. As we talked about, we did finish the utility relocations in 2023. We were actually in some procured contract negotiations and disputes through 23, and that contract was re-awarded, so we have selected our contractor. They are here with us tonight, and we've been actively working since October once their contract was re-awarded. And then quickly in January and February of this year, we actually mobilized up to the site to do an entry into the vapor containment structure. And the primary reason that we want to do that was there's some concerns from our perspective about the encasement material. We did an entry and we took additional samples, and that analysis is still pending, but it will help us make sure that we are implementing all the necessary safety precautions as we move forward with the project. So based on the re-award of the contract, we've lost a little bit of time. So now project completion has pushed to 2029 at this time. So moving into our regulatory framework, we are self-regulated, so the Army does regulate our reactors. We are regulated by the Army Reactor Office. All of our reactors were authorized under Section 91B of the Atomic Energy Act of 1954. We do follow and adhere to the Army Radiation Safety Program, which is AR 385-10. We have our own radiation protection plans developed by the Corps of Engineers that we're currently implementing, and then the contractor will be developing their own set of radiation protection plans, which will be implemented as part of the project. Our Army permits are issued by the U.S. Army Nuclear and Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Agency. We call them USANCA. They sit with us at Fort Belvoir. They come and do quarterly inspections of both sites, and they were actually here with us in January to observe the work that we were doing in the vapor containment structure. They also stood up a council called the Army Reactor Council, which has a significant number of subject matter experts on it for security, environmental, radiation protection, and they also help the Army Reactor Office make decisions about our regulatory framework and do inspections of our project site. Next slide. So some of the applicable regulations: the Atomic Energy Act, the National Environmental Policy Protection Act, which is what drove our environmental assessment, clean air, clean water, Our regulators to date, as we've discussed, the Army Reactor Office is actively involved. The site is listed on the National Register, so because we are decommissioning the site, we have coordinated with the Alaska State Historic Preservation Office for mitigation. So all the artifacts, there's some plaques and some other items left, will be preserved for perpetuity, and we will be issuing a historical mitigation report for the site. And then we've also been coordinating with EPA Region 10 and ADEC with respect to the project. Okay, so we'll take you through some of the decommissioning, permitting, and planning that went into our current efforts today. So as I indicated, a considerable amount of characterization work has been done at the site since 2011. Our proposed action for the site is to decommission and dismantle the SM-1A. We will be removing all residual radioactivity remaining at the site, and then the site will be cleaned up and released for unrestricted use. So the garrison and Doyen can do whatever the parties agree to with the site afterwards. As we said, the environmental assessment resulted in a finding of no significant impact. And although there are some short-term impacts from construction and demolition, the long-term benefit is we are removing the source of radioactivity from the site and from the community. We are doing historical preservation in accordance with our memorandum of agreement with the State Historic Preservation Office. And all of our decommissioning planning was completed in January of 2022 and accepted by our regulator, which did result in issuance of our permit in May of 2022. Now, as I indicated, this is the third reactor that this team has done. So this entire team has done 2 prior reactors. So our first reactor was the SM-1A, which was a reactor on a floating nuclear barge. And then the sister plant to Fort Greely is the SM-1 at Fort Belvoir, and the team is in active decommissioning now. So we're going to just take you through a couple quick facts about those projects. So the SM-1A was our deactivated nuclear reactor on board the Sturgis barge. So that was the first reactor that this team did, and the reason we did this one first was because it was obviously a floating barge and it was susceptible to potential risks within its storage fleet in the James River fleet. We took that to Galveston, Texas to implement the project in April of 2015. Roughly 3.5 years later, by August of 18, all of the decommissioning had been completed, and we were successfully able to release the barge radiologically. We then towed the vessel to Brownsville, Texas, where we actually underwent extensive shipbreaking, and we were able to recycle the remaining barge. So it went back into commerce. At the conclusion of this project, some important things: no impacts to water or sediments. So we tested those on a quarterly basis as part of the project. No public exposure to radiological or non-radiological contaminants at any time during the implementation of that project. And we had 0 non-compliance with respect to radiation safety on that project. Of note, with respect to dose, all of our entire crew, we had about 50 workers on that particular project, received 4,367 millirem. The dose to the public is 5,000, so we were well within that. And again, 0 dose to the public, and we have to estimate our dose going into the project. We came in at 28% of what we thought it would be, so significantly lower. And that's primarily because our team worked to minimize dose to our employees through a variety of engineering controls. So building on our successes with Sturgis, we started to implement the SM-1 at Fort Belvoir. At this point, that project started in 2021. The team has now successfully removed all the reactor components from that site. We've dismantled officially, just within the last week, all of the above ground structures at the site. We are actively remediating the soils in the lower portion of that site. There was some contamination. And then we expect that that project will be completed by 2025. We've gone 3 years on that project without a single lost time incident from a safety perspective. And again, from a radiological perspective, similar size crew, about 50 of us on that particular project. Overall dose to our entire crew, 879 millirem. And again, to date, we've been significantly lower than the doses that we expected our crew to see. So what we're bringing to this installation and this project is all the lessons that we learned on Sturgis and all the lessons that the team implementing SM-1 has learned. And so those key learning lessons will be brought here.
I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
It says on the previous screen, or this one, these a certain number of people received a certain amount of dose of radioactivity. Can we put that in perspective? Like, if you get in the big old jet airliner and you go up to 35,000 feet and you go up there for 3-4 hours, how much do you get for something that we normally see?
So, general population, every day, your general activities, assuming you're not flying every week like most of us are, about 620 millirem. If you're flying a lot, if you get a lot of medical x-rays, other types of things, that goes up. So we're fairly close to what you would get in your normal everyday life. And we do have slides on that a little bit later to explain that in more detail.
And that wasn't a dose each person got,
that was
collective dose
everybody. Yeah. So as we transition into SM-1A, right now, our contractor is Aptum, Amentum, Alaska, Inc., and so we call them A3D. They've actually implemented all three of these projects with us as well in some form or fashion. So the team coming here has got a vast amount of experience. They're tasked with providing all the overall project management for the project, developing all of our work plans, including safety and radiological plans, plus all the complex engineering documentation that goes into this. As I indicated, we will be removing all the reactor components and all the radiologically contaminated materials and soils. Everything will be properly packaged and then transported to the lower 48 for disposal. We do a significant amount of in-process radiological survey work to ensure that throughout implementation, everything is being done in accordance with our plans. Once demolition is complete and the buildings and structures are removed, there is some subsurface contamination that the team will go after and will remove. Once that's removed, we do a final status survey, which is the last radiological survey of the site, which is what the team will then use to provide unrestricted release to the garrison. So, like I said, we're really here to cover the next 12 to 18 months of work. So right now the team is gearing up for a summer mobilization. And one of the first things that we plan to do is build a weather enclosure over the actual site. The weather enclosure is essentially a large tent which will enclose the site and provide a tempered work area for our team to work year-round. It will also allow us to package all of our waste and have everything prepared before it leaves the weather enclosure. And then it will go to another waste storage area that we've coordinated with the installation to store that waste before it is shipped off-site. So this, again, minimizes risks associated with the Arctic conditions. It's going to provide storage for our equipment, primarily during the winter months, to make sure that it's always ready. And then it is only impacting and covering the north end of the site. So the south end of the site will continue to be operated by Doyen. So other key things with respect to the site, the red boundary is actually the boundary of our site. It will be fenced to comply with our safety and security protocols. We will have air samplers at all the perimeter locations. We will have radiological monitoring at the perimeter locations. And then we will have stormwater monitoring. There's a stormwater outfall just outside of the location. And then all the background monitoring will be done in our office building adjacent to the site. So we collect this data monthly, weekly, and then we prepare an annual report indicating all the radiological and environmental sampling for the site. And so as I indicated, that's kind of a picture of what the tent will look like, a little bit larger in scale. We'll have one of those over the SM-1 site to serve as a weather enclosure. And then we also will have another location for our waste, which will have a similar tent to store all of our waste. It'll be packaged and ready for transport. It'll be stored in this location. It will have all the same environmental and radiological monitoring that the primary site has. It is approximately half a mile from our site. It'll allow us to stage our waste off-site to maximize our project site footprint, which is very small. And then we will transport waste off base from this location once we're ready. So once the weather enclosure is built and the waste storage area is built, the next portion of the project begins, and that will be formal decommissioning. So for us, formal decommissioning starts when we actually start all of our hazardous material abatement. So this is a 50s, 60s building built by the government, by the Army. So we have a considerable amount of asbestos, lead-based paint, PCBs, lighting, ballast. All of that has to come out first. And the reason that we do that is it avoids impact to our crew. It avoids inadvertently getting exposed when we cut through wiring or some of the other materials in the plant. So abatement will be the first thing that we do, likely in the January timeframe of 2025. And right now we're estimating it will take approximately 3 months to implement that abatement work. Once that abatement work is complete, we plan to start removing materials and equipment at the site. So the second floor of the plant, the steam generator, or the steam turbine, I'm sorry, the generator, some electrical panels, there's a bridge crane. All of that will be removed, and we'll start making room to get access to some of the other reactor components and systems and set up additional containment. So prior to all these work evolutions, we plan to host additional public meetings, get input, and make sure that you guys are all aware of what we're doing at the site. We won't be generating any waste until the abatement starts. So this year will primarily just be construction at the site, and then waste generation will start next year. So with respect to waste generation, transport, and then radiation safety, kind of answer some of the questions you brought up earlier. So minimal impact to the public from the SM-1A project site. As we indicated, the reactor pressure vessel does not contain any nuclear fuel at this time. All the control rods have been removed. All the fuel has been removed. And we've been in safe store since '73, which has allowed the significant radioactive decay to occur, which makes it safe for our crews to go in and implement the work. So as we talked about earlier, the average annual radiation dose to the public is 620 millirem. So on our other site, we were just barely over that for our entire crew for removal of all the reactor components. We do have a very highly skilled team, engineers, we have radiological health physicists, scientists, and then our contractor has the same team members as we do. And we plan to implement this project in full adherence with safety as our #1 priority. So as part of the safe store, as I indicated, we were primarily waiting for the cobalt-60 to decay. So the cobalt-60 is a gamma emitter, and it is what causes our occupational risk and our occupational dose. So around 2007 to 2012, because it has such a short half-life, it had decayed away, which makes it safe for our crews and our teams to go in and safely implement the work. The other component that we're concerned about is nickel-63. It's a low-energy beta emitter, and that's primarily what impacts the disposal facilities. It's not going to decay away. It's never going to decay away, which is why we want to remove the SM-1A from the garrison. We're going to ship it to a disposal facility that is permitted to manage this waste in perpetuity. So our transportation route, once we leave the SM-1A site, our waste storage area is the blue hatched area kind of in the upper right-hand corner of this photo. We'll leave the installation along Robin Road and then out Big Delta and onto the Richardson Highway. Our trucks will then go into Fairbanks, and then it's going to be multimodal from there. We will package everything at the SM-1A site, store it. It'll be ready for transport. That waste storage area will have a concrete pad, security fencing, and remote security monitoring at all times. So once we leave the installation, we will be going by truck to Fairbanks. Once we get into Fairbanks, we're going to get on the Alaska Railroad. We're going to go by rail to either the Port of Anchorage or the Port of Whittier, depending upon our container size. We will go by barge to the Port of Seattle. We will get back on rail once we get to Seattle. And our disposal facility is Waste Control Specialists in Andrews County, Texas. And that's where all the waste from the site will be shipped to. So everything at this point will be transported out of the state of Alaska. We don't intend to leave anything behind in the state of Alaska. So we will be shipping everything to the lower 48. We're anticipating about 2 trucks a week on average once we get started. And then the rail shipments and the barge shipments will follow suit depending upon when we hit the rail and when we hit the barge locations. So because we're in the state of Alaska. Oh.
Non-regulated radioactive waste, are we talking construction waste?
Construction waste, RCRA waste, PCB waste, everything's gonna go to, yep. Yep. So this is pretty much our transportation route in a very condensed format. As part of the environmental assessment, we did our initial round of tribal consultation in June of 2022. Based on that initial consultation, we did host a tribal meeting in September of 2020, and we have reinvigorated our tribal engagement at this point. Just prior to getting here in early March, we sent out another 103 letters to the tribes, and we're starting to get feedback with respect to that to see if anybody has any concerns along the transportation route that we can address. So public involvement, we've got a significant amount of stakeholders here. Obviously, we've talked about our regulators, other government agencies, public interest groups. We've coordinated with the local tribes and officials, obviously working very closely hand in hand with the garrison as the property owner, Doyen as the site owner, and then both federal and state officials. And so my goal, transparent communications at all times. Typically once a month, I'll send out a stakeholder update, and then we will post that to our project website. Another tool that we use a lot is we use YouTube videos. So once the project gets underway, it's very hard for me to host tours and events because of the safety protocols at the site. So we do extensive videography, and actually the video from the SM-1 entry earlier in the year was already posted, so you can see exactly how that was completed, the safety protocols that we used. And then you can also see how we implemented SM-1 because all the component removal, everything that we've done at the sister site, we've recorded and posted. So it'll kind of give you some preview, a trailer, if you will, into what will be happening here. So some impacts to the local community. We do acknowledge it's going to put a couple extra trucks on the road. We do understand the impacts of the traffic from the Kinross mine. And I know we're working with Colonel Marshall. We're going to get the point of contact from them, start to coordinate with them, see what we can do to make sure that we're having a minimal impact on the traffic conditions with the Richardson Highway. Increased jobs, we do anticipate a crew size of about 50 team members, and our goal is to really primarily get them locally to the best of our ability. So skilled laborers, operators, truck drivers, and then most of our staff is either going to buy homes in Delta and local lodging. So we're hopeful that that revenue will be an assistance to the community. Again, our stakeholders, Region 10, they'll be in charge of kind of our waste generation. We will be coordinating with them to get our waste generator ID. Alaska Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Conservation for any site-specific issues that we have. And then all of our historical mitigation will continue to coordinate with the Preservation Office on those items. So any questions, comments? Okay. I'm good. So the video from tonight will be posted on YouTube probably by tomorrow or so, usually. Okay. And then, as I said, if you guys want to sign up for the stakeholder updates, go ahead and sign in, and then you guys will get the stakeholder updates from our team. So we really appreciate you guys coming out. And if you have questions, just let us know. I will be as open of a book as we can, as long as it doesn't violate our security protocols. Okay, so we're gonna stick around if you guys have one-on-one questions you want to ask of us or the team. So thank you for coming out tonight. All right, now I'll take a water.